Honorable Member of Parliament, Dhaka 9, Chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bangladesh. And finally, we have Ms. Farah Kabir, Country Director, ActionAid Bangladesh. Pleasure to have you all. This session will be moderated by Ms. Farah Kabir, and before I hand it over to her, there are a few housekeeping rules for this session. Please turn on your microphone when speaking and turn off your microphone when finished talking. Please turn on your video when speaking. For the remaining time, feel free to keep your video on or off as you prefer. So without further ado, I would now like to invite Ms. Farah Kabir to take over the session. Apa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anhara. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome from me and the entire ActionAid Bangladesh family. We have had some very exciting couple of days, and it was a learning journey. It was a cultural journey, humorous journey. So it was very beautifully done. And we tried to bring science, social science, culture, the diversity in relation to water, river, climate change, as this is the 6th International Water Conference, a flagship event of ActionAid Bangladesh, which took off in 2014. And we tried to understand the different dimensions and to take something from Dr. Imtiaz, the disciplines and post-disciplines of these issues. What came out of the deliberations will be shared with you. The recordings will be shared with you. We have had 4 thematic sessions, and I'll just run it past you quickly. They were on water commons, lessons from COVID-19, water, gender, and COVID-19 nexus, rights of the rivers, water and climate, grassroots innovation and solution. And we have had speakers from the globe, from different parts of the world, sharing experiences. Just as we identified the problems, we also looked at the solutions. And we had I'll just share a few key points with you because we are more interested to hear the guests and participants who are with us in the closing session. It was quite evident from the speakers that we need to get out of the box, change our mindsets, be more water-centric in our thinking, in our planning, in our analysis. We need to develop a methodology for self-assessing the current challenges. And we know that water, the scarcity of water, misuse, abuse, governance of water has been on the mind of all of us, just as the climate crisis. And, you know, the emphasis on climate crisis cannot be enough. And we really need to collectively act on that. So these issues did come up. And what has COVID-19 done? Or where has COVID-19 taken us? That was discussed because the relationship between water, its source, the river, and climate change has to be understood to be able to take initiatives. There is the science, there's also the social science. There is the economics, there's the politics, but there's also human behavior. And what has been emphasized is we need the transformational change in the mindsets of people, wherever they are. And particularly as we were talking about Bangladesh, we were suggesting that we shift from a land-centric to a water-centric understanding. Heritage, branding, cultural tourism, water museums are very important as learning instruments, as an opportunity for enriching our minds. And therefore, the community-led water museum in Kuakata was much appreciated. It is a member of the Global Water Museums, and we learn from other water museum experiences. And therefore, there was a thinking that we need more community-led initiatives. Investment in infrastructure for development is important. And there was a critique of dam infrastructure development, but also there was an understanding that it has to be relevant, prasangik. It must be applicable to the situation, the time, the location, the ecology, the environment. So these are something that we need to understand. There's a need for synergy. not only synergy between the different ministries and the different actors or in authority, but also synergy between the public, the private, the civic. And this was emphasized that we have to see how people innovate, because they can't wait for a system or the bureaucracy or the political actors to come to them. Sometimes they have to find their own solutions. So we need to respect them. We need to bring the toad science with the special science, the eagle science together. And we need to have a plan of how collectively we can act on these issues in these areas. With those few words, it was a very rich discussion. I cannot do justice in such short time, but I'm just giving a few highlights so that as we hear our speakers, they keep in their mind that these are certain things they may want to address. With this, I'm giving it back to Anhara to take us to the next speaker. Yeah.
Thank you, Farah. I would now like to welcome Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed to share his words with us.
I know Dr. Ahmed requested to speak later, but are you okay to speak now?
I think I want to hear Salimul Bhai and others, and that would be nice.
Okay.
If it's possible. So, Salimul Bhai, please go ahead first.
Professor Salimul Haq, yeah.
Thank you very much, Imtiaz and Farah and Anhara for introducing me and inviting me to speak. So, as you all know, my area of competence and expertise and knowledge is in climate change. Not water per se, but in the context of Bangladesh, climate change and water are inextricable. They are really two sides of the same coin. We are a deltaic country. We live on the two mega rivers, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, and a third major river, the Meghna, the delta of these three rivers. We have a very low-lying coastal area, particularly the southwestern and central parts of our coast. And we only have a few hilly areas in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. But every single part of the country, and water is a very key part of that, is also vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And I'll just very quickly go through several of them. The first one is, and I'll go through them in order of magnitude, from the smaller to the bigger. The smaller ones would be drought. One doesn't think of Bangladesh as a drought-prone country, but the northwestern part of Bangladesh, the Barin Tract, during the dry season actually suffers from lack of water, and we have to depend on groundwater for irrigation there. And sometimes that is also, the groundwater is also being depleted quite rapidly. So in global terms, it's not considered a drought-prone area, but in Bangladeshi terms, it's an area that does have a drought-prone season, the dry season or the winter season, when water scarcity is a big problem there. Then we have the major rivers. The rivers flood every year. Flooding is normal, but abnormal floods are not normal. And the magnitude of floods is measured in return periods. A 20-year return period, once a 20-year flood is generally seen as a magnitude, a big flood that causes a lot of damage. It happens once every 20 years. We have records going back many hundreds of years, and that's roughly the time period in which these major floods have occurred in the past, until the last 20 years. In the last 20 years, we've had 4 of them. So the 1 in 20-year magnitude flood is no longer a 1 in 20-year event anymore. It's now a 1 in 5-year, possibly even a 1 in 4-year event. And we have to be prepared for that. We can't think, once we had a flood like we had this year, in fact, that we can wait another 20 years till the next one. We have to be better prepared. And then even in the floods, there are different kinds of floods. In the Meghna Basin, in the Sylhet region, in the northeast, we have flash floods, which occur very, very fast. And if they happen, and they're mainly because of rainfall in the upper catchment in the Indian part of side of the border in Assam, Cherrapunji, Once they have very heavy rainfall on that side, the water comes within a matter of hours and it's unstoppable. We cannot stop it from coming. And often if it comes very early in the year, it can devastate the crops there. And we have had several early floods in the Howrah region that have been quite devastating in the last few years. One of the solutions we used to have, which was a good solution in normal times, was submersible embankments. So we had embankments which protected the rice crop and allowed the rice crop to be harvested even if the water was rising. And then when the water began to rise above a certain threshold, the place was flooded and we adapted to the flooding. But those submersible dikes are no longer anymore a suitable adaptation because the floods are becoming earlier. They're more erratic. The timing has gone out of sync from what we used to have. And so we need to be aware of that. And then another category of flooding are in the cities like Dhaka and Chittagong, where that is a man-made creation. We have caused drainage congestion by constructing over our wetlands and plastic pollution in our drains, so that a heavy rainfall causes us to have a waterlogging, and it's miserable for the citizens of Dhaka and Chittagong when water accumulates and cannot get out. Takes a long time to get out. And then another area that we are now increasingly seeing, we didn't used to see that, is landslides in the hill tracts. This is now becoming an increasing phenomena. In fact, the FAO just did a study on landslides in the hill tracts, and they are getting much worse. So the hill tracts are having a double whammy. On the monsoon period with heavy rainfall, they're having landslides, and then the dry season is becoming a longer dry season. And as a result, water scarcity is another problem. And the biggest problem, I will say, is the low-lying coastal area where ActionAid have their water museum in Kuakata. The low-lying coastal zone in Bangladesh has already a non-climate change related hazard of cyclones, coastal flooding with cyclones. The climate change impact on those cyclones is not that there will be more cyclones, but that the severity of cyclones will increase because the intensity of a given cyclone is related to the temperature of the sea. And the last cyclone that we had, Amphan, became a super cyclone when it was out at sea because the sea surface temperature of the Bay of Bengal was about 2 degrees higher than normal. And the energy from that higher temperature makes the cyclone a much more severe cyclone. Fortunately for Bangladesh, it hit India first, caused a lot of damage in Kolkata, then through the Sundarbans, then to Bangladesh, but it still caused quite a lot of damage. Fortunately, we have a very good cyclone warning system. Human life lost has been reduced very considerably in Bangladesh. Major achievement for Bangladesh government, people, NGOs, all of us together. But nevertheless, damage occurs and people lose their livelihoods, lose their homes. The damage we cannot stop from happening. Life lost we have been able to reduce a lot. And then the final bit I will talk about is on sea level rise. Now, sea level rise and salinity intrusion and increase is something we are beginning to see. And in the low-lying coastal zone of particularly the southwest, in the Sundarbans, in Satkhira, even in Barisal, we are seeing significant amount of salinity increasing. People are having to drink saline water. We are trying to give them alternatives for fresh water, particularly rainwater harvesting in a big way. That's happening. That's a good thing. Our Rice Research Institute scientists have come up with salt-tolerant varieties of rice, which are now being planted in millions of hectares by our farmers, another good thing. But there are limits to how much we can adapt to these things. Eventually, salinity will intrude in a way that adaptation will reach its limits over time. We are talking longer time. So one of the things I think we need to be thinking about is how do we, over this longer time period, enable the younger generation, the boys and girls, to be able to educated and enabled to not have to become farmers and fishers like their parents, but to be able to go to towns, not necessarily come to Dhaka, but go to other towns and get professional jobs or get into other kinds of income generation activities there and make a living and be able to survive there better than they would have survived where they are. So it's a complex issue, climate change, but it is absolutely integrated with water in Bangladesh in many, many different ways. And I've just, touched the surface in my brief overview of the many aspects of how water is integral to Bangladesh itself, and then integral to Bangladesh tackling climate change at the same time. So let me end by congratulating ActionAid on this water event that they do every year. I know Farah every year invites me to go to Kuakata. I haven't been able to do that, but I promise as and when circumstances allow, I would love to go and visit and spend time down there with you at this annual event that you have made a major event for water issues in Bangladesh, and I commend you for that, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much. And back to Anhara.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words. Sir, before you leave, I would like to request everyone to turn on your camera so that we can take a picture. Can we all please turn on our camera so that we can take a picture?
As we take a picture, I mean, Professor Salim ul Haq, ECAD and ActionAid and others, we've had a very long partnership in terms of both community-led learning and around adaptation or climate change, and also the work that we were doing in Cox's Bazar because of the implication of the refugees and its impact on climate, and the use of the groundwater, the air pollution, all this research is very much coming forward. So I hope that we can bring it to the next conference next year, some of this learning, because it is critical for any interventions we take. And the partnership with ECAD is much valued, and of course your expertise and inspiration.
Absolutely. I think, one of the neglected categories of vulnerable people around the world are refugee populations. And the Rohingyas in the Cox's Bazar are a good example, but they're not the only one. Almost every refugee population anywhere in Turkey, in Syria, across the world, in South Sudan, happen to be living in one of the most vulnerable places in those particular locations. So the refugees tend to be put in places which are in and of themselves some of the worst places to be living. And therefore, when climate change happens, they become the victims of that. And so that's another, if you like, category of extremely vulnerable population to the impacts of climate change.
Thank you. Anhara, are we done?
Yes.
Stay with us if you can. Please do stay with us. Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Her Excellency Natalie Sherd, Ambassador, Embassy of Switzerland in Bangladesh, to deliver her speech. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join the conference tonight or today, depending where you are in the world. Water is a common good, key natural resources for all of us. We need to take care of it and we need to share it. For my country, Switzerland, water is at the heart of many initiatives that we are supporting globally and also in our bilateral relationship with many different countries, for instance, in Central Asia and in the Middle East. Switzerland is often said to be the water tower of Europe, with two main West European rivers crossing Switzerland, the Rhone and the Rhine. We have learned over the years how to sustainably take care of our water for human, agricultural, and industrial use. We have also learned to share peacefully and equitably common waters with neighboring countries. The cooperation program of Switzerland in Bangladesh dates back to the year of the independence of the country. And we aim at contributing to a more equitable society that enjoys inclusive and sustainable growth. And through our Agency for International Cooperation, Switzerland is engaged in democratic governance, safe migration, and income and economic development, and contributes to the humanitarian response to the Rohingya refugee crisis. Our support here in the country is aligned with the government of Bangladesh, 7th and 8th five-year plans, the perspective plans, and the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. And in this regard, we have the intention to support the government in implementing the Delta Plan jointly with other development partners. And for sure, the Agenda 2030 is more crucial than ever. And here, SDG 6, Safe Water and Sanitation, is one of our guiding stars. Safe water and sanitation makes a difference and impact the health, the income, food security, and well-being. SDG 16, accountable institution, justice and peace, is equally guiding our action. And good governance is key to sustainably manage water so that everyone have access to it and that it is preserved for the generation to come. In Bangladesh, Switzerland has partnered with many NGOs and government entities over the time to ensure equitable and adequate access to water resources. We have tried to couple the local level, working with local government authorities, water communities and committees, and the national level to implement water regulation in an efficient and sustainable water. And currently, through our project office in Cox's Bazar, we are directly providing technical support to the government of Bangladesh for the provision of safe drinking water and sanitation to both host and refugee communities. So Bangladesh has lots of water, but the quality of its water resources is often poor and deteriorating. Climate change, urbanization, industrialization, and population growth are major driving factors for it. And we heard right now also that climate change has an impact, a negative impact on people's right to water and sanitation. Natural disasters are aggravating water scarcity. And in Bangladesh, you also have saltwater intrusion and contamination of drinking water. I understand that despite the widely acknowledged progress in many areas of social and economic development, the country still faces a number of barriers to universal water coverage. There is no doubt that ensuring safe water supply in Bangladesh is central to its development socially and economically. Safely managed water services guarantee to a household that it has access to water sources, an access that is available when needed and free of contamination. And women play a central role, taking part in water collection, as they are the one for the household who fetch it and carry the water. More than ever, the women should take part in the decision-making when planning for proper water management. Water access remains especially a challenge in hard-to-reach areas such as hilly region, riverine island, coastal area, tea gardens, and for excluded and marginalized groups such as urban slum and pavement dwellers or refugees, as we just heard. Lack of institutional and financial capacities and enforcement of formal regulation, as well as damaged infrastructure and intermittent services, have left a major gap in service delivery in water. Even if standards are in place, identifying appropriate monitoring mechanism and accountability remain key challenges. To this point, according to the World Bank, half of the total allocation to meet the government's envisioned water targets by 2025 is still missing. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the necessity to guarantee access to water, particularly to those in the most vulnerable situation. Switzerland has supported several COVID-19 response initiatives. Access to safe water for hand washing stations was central in our response. Almost 1 year into the pandemic, we came to realize that hand washing is also affected by inequalities, one of the major challenges of our era. In the slums of Dhaka, for instance, where water points are already scarce, price of water went skyrocketing, depriving many of the protective act of washing their hands regularly. Disposal of wastewater and maintenance of hand washing stations in public spaces have also been quite difficult. So authorities have a role to play in securing access and maintenance. At the same time, communities and community leaders, women and men, have to be included in the decision-making regarding the location and design of the hand washing stations. This reinforces ownership and therefore the use and maintenance of what is a common good. COVID-19 is a wake-up call that we cannot afford ignoring. The dual threat of COVID-19 and climate change has illustrated the need for collective action and to shift our approach to managing multiple crises at the same time. The 2020 Human Development Report of UNDP is quite clear. Humankind has become the principal threat to its survival since we don't manage our planet sustainably. On the basis of the discussion, what we hear, and the experience of my country, Switzerland, let me share with you some of our findings. Improving coordination among all government agencies, including the local government institutes, is key to ensure water security and justice for all. Organizations working in the water sector should promote behavioral changes, rethinking our appreciation of the value of water and how to use it sustainably. Integrated solutions are the only way to ensure that no one is left behind. We need also to strengthen and continue strengthening institutional capacities of related institutions, such as Water Development Board, Ministry of Water Resources, Department of Public Health and Engineering, and Bangladesh River Commission. The data availability is to be ensured to track and measure climate-induced vulnerability and impact of water sector. The concept, finally, of water footprint should be promoted by the private sector to reduce use of water in the commercial production and recycling of water through wastewater treatment. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to ensure that safe water reaches everyone and that no one is left behind. And I want to thank you for participating today. And I also want to wish us all the wisdom and the strength and the political will to move into a blue future. Thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency, for your valuable words. May I now invite His Excellency Ken O'Flaherty, COP26 Regional Ambassador for Asia Pacific and South Asia, to share his speech for the ceremony. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me today. The next 12 months are critical for our planet, for demonstrating that we're accelerating progress towards our long-term goals of keeping global mean temperature rises well below 2 degrees and strive to limit the rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In November this year, the UK will host the vital UN Climate Conference, COP26, where the world will meet to agree on more ambitious action. We recognise the severe consequences and unprecedented challenges that all countries, businesses and people are today facing when they are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. We must collectively support a green, resilient and inclusive recovery that helps us to deliver our existing commitments. COP26 must be the moment when the world comes together to ramp up momentum towards a climate resilient zero carbon economy. The UK is clear that to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to help all countries, rich and poor, anticipate climate change, and we have to take actions together to mitigate its impacts. So adaptation and resilience is a top priority for the UK government as we build up to COP26 later this year. We want to use the summit to accelerate resilience to the evolving climate and weather extremes. Investment is key. We're investing in our own resilience in the UK, for example, to boost our flood defences, and we're investing overseas through almost £6 billion of international climate finance overseas in the last 4 years. We have pledged over 11.6 billion more pounds over the next 5 years and aim to spend half of that on adaptation. We will use COP26 to urge all countries to do more to build their climate resilience, and will encourage donor countries to increase their investment in adaptation. Earlier this month, the UK Prime Minister announced the Adaptation Action Coalition, a new coalition to drive practical action, and of which Bangladesh, with its world-renowned expertise on adaptation and resilience, is a key member. The UK Climate Champions teams also launched their Race to Resilience, working with businesses and civil society to build resilience worldwide to climate change. Now, all of this has to include action on water, which of course is the theme of your conference today. In Bangladesh and around the world, millions of people are currently navigating the COVID-19 pandemic with the added challenge of living without access to safe water. The provision of safe water, sanitation, and hygienic conditions is essential to protecting human health during all infectious disease outbreaks, including the current COVID-19 pandemic. Water is a finite national resource, and it is essential for life. Water is required for many different purposes. The right to water means that priority in allocation must be given to water for drinking, cooking, and personal hygiene needs. States need to have regard to sustainability and the need for the right to be realized by present and future generations. And water is essential for our collective action on climate change. Water is one of the first and most obvious ways in which we notice climate change, through droughts, through floods, and in changing rainfall patterns. It cuts across all 5 of the UK's COP26 campaigns: energy, nature, adaptation and resilience, transport and finance, as well as our broader development efforts. Now, I don't need to tell this audience about the global water challenge. 4 billion people without enough water, Himalayan glaciers melting, and water ecosystems collapsing. Urgent action by governments, businesses, and citizens worldwide is needed. Women and girls, poor households, marginalized groups, and persons with disabilities often already experience inequalities in terms of access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. Climate resilience means water resilience for most developing countries, and it will deliver the water security that is key to recovery. So good water management needs to be a priority for all governments and all of those in the sector, for academics and for civil society, and for businesses and households. The UK government will work to make this happen and to make COP26 a key milestone towards climate resilient water management for all, as we build to the UN Water Summit in 2023. In the UK, we're committed to escalating our efforts. We'll be mainstreaming water across all our development programming and policy work in the new FCDO. We will develop new strands on biodiversity in rivers and lakes, as well as the marine pollution which is caused by plastics and sewage. We'll soon be launching our new £500 million Blue Planet Fund to help tackle that pollution and protect critically important marine ecosystems. And we're forming new partnerships with like-minded donor countries, as well as using our influence to persuade the multilateral development banks to focus more on nature-based solutions. For example, we're working with the Dutch through the Global Commission on Adaptation Water Action Track, and we're promoting the UK-led 30 by 30 initiative to protect at least 30% of the planet's oceans by 2030. We very much hope that Bangladesh can join this initiative this year. We're also very focused on fresh water, joining together to support water initiatives such as the Global Water Partnership and Sanitation and Water for All. We very much look forward to growing those relationships. Now, domestically, we have a checkered history when it comes to water in the UK. We learned harsh lessons from cholera outbreaks in Victorian London and the death of major rivers such as the Mersey and the Thames. But we have also learned how to undo some of the damage and how to address new threats like microplastics and effluent discharge and leakages. One of the really big changes we'll see in the UK will come from our decision to switch our entire agricultural subsidy system away from rewarding destruction towards an environmental land management system based on public money in return for public goods. For example, maximizing biodiversity, managing land in such a way as to improve water flow and retention, reducing flood risk, and so on. Using UK aid, we're currently building 3 large climate change programs in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East North Africa regions. Each of those programs will have significant water components and a major focus on nature-based solutions. But we know in the UK that even if we get our own house in order, our water footprint nevertheless extends vastly beyond UK shores. The agricultural commodities we import alone come with high levels of water consumption. Around 70% of freshwater use globally is accounted for by agriculture, and the livestock sector is currently using about 20% of freshwater for feed production. We are told that it takes 15,415 litres of water to produce just 1 kilogram of beef, and almost 6,000 litres to produce 1 kilogram of pork. By contrast, it takes only 287 litres of water to grow 1 kilogram of potatoes, and 1,600 litres to produce a kilogram of bread from wheat. So in the UK, we're determined to clean up our own water footprint and to work with others to deliver change internationally. If we get that right, we can protect freshwater resources in consumer and producer countries around the world, and we can help ensure a healthy, secure, and prosperous future for the world's poorest. We are committed to working closely with our partners in Bangladesh on this important agenda. Bangladesh has long positioned itself as a leader in this debate, becoming the first country in the world in July 2019 to grant all of its rivers the same legal status as humans, so as to protect the world's largest delta from further degradation from pollution, illegal dredging, and human intrusion. Today, communities living along the remote southwestern coastline of Bangladesh face a myriad of climate change-induced problems, in particular water-related problems. Bangladesh has several examples of how nature-based solutions can improve water storage and supply, thereby increasing water availability and potentially reducing competition between different water users and uses. I know that Bangladesh has much knowledge to share with the world, and that includes experience in community-based natural resource management, community-based adaptation, and ecosystem-based adaptation. I know that Bangladesh is currently updating or developing very important documents on climate, such as its National Adaptation Plan and its Nationally Developed Contribution, and I hope that Bangladesh will seize the opportunity to emphasize water management in its policy agenda. We are determined to deepen our bilateral cooperation through the UK-Bangladesh Partnership Forum. This should promote collaboration and lasting partnerships at all levels between the UK and Bangladesh. I hope that this cooperation with Bangladesh can in turn inform progress on the crucial water agenda globally, including at COP26. And I also hope that the findings of this event today will help us to take forward action ahead of and at COP26 in November. I invite you all to continue and accelerate your collective global action on water, and I look forward to working with you in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, for your enlightening speech. Your words will definitely help us prepare for the upcoming COP26 taking place this year. I would now like to invite our chief guest, Mr. Saber Hossain Chaudhary, Honorable Member of Parliament, to deliver his speech. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was listening with rapt attention to our special guest, and I acknowledge, of course, Dr. Salim ul Haq. Professor Imtiaz hasn't yet spoken, but I'm sure he will at some point. And Excellencies, Her Excellency, the Ambassador for Switzerland in Bangladesh, and also Ken, very good to see you again virtually. Farah Kabir, thank you for inviting me and for the excellent initial words that you spoke. You talked about how this conference brought together science, social science, culture, diversity, and any event which brings or tries to bring those themes together is bound to be very rich and vibrant, and I'm sure it has been that for the past 2 days. We have talked today about the nexus between water and climate change and also COVID in terms of the necessity of collective action. But I think COVID also teaches us something which perhaps hasn't been touched so far today. And that is the fact that we need to rethink. We need to build back better. We need to throw everything up in the air and see how it comes down. And I think that's why this conference is very important. And the reason why I'm attending today is not really to deliver wisdom, which I don't have much of in any event, but it was really to learn from what you have done over the past couple of days. Now, I think it is very important that from a policy uptake point of view, what we decide to do and how we decide to do it is very important in terms of that being driven by evidence, that being driven by expert opinion. And I think this is the value of an event such as this. And so I was very interested to listen to what needs to be done. Equally important is how we do it. And I hope ActionAid is going to follow up on this and share that with us, because that is really where the uptake comes in. We know the importance of governance. We are aware of the dimensions of the scarcity at present and in the future. By the year 2050, the demand for water will increase by 50%. So when you look at it in terms of the scarcity now, the stress now, and just think by the year 2050, the demand is going to go up by 50%. The demand in agriculture for water usage will go up by something like 70%. So this is really something which is not just looming in the distant horizon, it is very near to where we are today. And the reason why we had water stress as one of the elements or themes in the planetary emergency motion of Bangladesh Parliament was because precisely of this, the specter of water stress. Ken, you talked about the fact that 4 billion people don't have access to water year round. I believe every 1 month in a year, they face critical shortages. And almost about 500 million don't have access to water around the year. So that's a huge number. And then if we look at the city dimension, the demand for water in cities has really gone up. We know that the water table is a major concern as we try and extract more and more out of groundwater. Dhaka is facing that crisis. Shanghai in China, there has been a huge drop in the water table. So I think from a policy point of view, and this is how I look at the water challenge, is how can we have a holistic management plan? It is not looking at water in isolation. It is not just about building a dam or a reservoir. It is looking at the entire water cycle, starting from source, then going on to distribution, then going to economic use, then going to recycling and treatment, use, and then finally coming back to nature, coming back to the environment. So how can we have a management plan that deals with the challenge and the opportunity of water in a very holistic way? I think that is absolutely critical. And of course, other than the glacier belt in the Himalayas in the north and the rising sea level in the south of Bangladesh, we also have the huge issue of sharing water as a very important resource with our neighboring countries. Bangladesh being at the lowest part of as the lowest riparian country of the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna basins. There are 57 rivers that we share with our neighbors. So what happens in India, in China, in Bhutan, and Nepal is, of course, going to be very important for Bangladesh. And not just the 57 transboundary rivers, there are almost 700 rivers that run across Bangladesh as a country. So, I mean, water is literally life when it comes to Bangladesh. And so it makes eminent sense that if you have better water policies, it's going to lead to better lives for the people. So that is, of course, the huge governance dimension. Also, if you look at potential theaters of conflict in the future, I think water is right there amongst some of the biggest risks that we have. So from a global peace and security point of view, it's not just governance under Goal 16, and peace and conflict is also very much related to the water goal. And just SDG 6 doesn't in fact do justice to water because it's well beyond that. SDG 6 is just one goal. And then, if you look at it seriously, you've got climate change. As 13, you've got life below water. As 14, you've got life on land. So there wouldn't be any life on land or life below water if there was no water. And then, of course, you have the SDG 16. And then the very important dimension, which is what you have in your event, it's a global coming together of practitioners from across the world, is international cooperation. because if COVID teaches us anything, it is the absolute imperative of us having the will to respond to these rising challenges before it gets out of hand. So just as it with climate, acting fast enough, I think it's also going to be the same for water. Of course, as Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Switzerland mentioned, we do have challenges. I think if you look at constraints in Bangladesh in terms of not just having good policies, but implementing policies, which is equally important. So institutional capacity is very important. How can we come out of this whole concept of compartments and look at things in a holistic manner? How can we have better coordination amongst the various departments of government? So that is also important. And then again, from a parliamentary perspective, unlike the House of Commons in the UK, we only have standing committees rather than select committees, which are thematic in nature. So we don't have a committee in the Parliament of Bangladesh, which looks at water as a separate theme. So we have all of these challenges also that are there in the horizon. But I think going back to the main premise that water is life, and if you have better water policies, you have a better life for the people that you represent. I think an event such as this is absolutely critical. I would be interested in, from a policy uptake point of view, in terms of how we do the things that we are saying we need to do. I think that is very, very important. And how can we then align the work of the government? How can we align our policies to the findings of events such as this, and also the other great research work? Dr. Salimul Haq, we were in an event the other day, Farah, you were also there, and we were talking about, how can we have better policies? How can the policies be better informed? How can we have a voice of the people really at the fringes? And how can we mainstream that and the policy responses that we have? I think those are very important. And Canada, of course, the COP26 is going to be a major challenge. I think we spoke in an event a few months back, and this is really the COP that is, I think, going to be the last chance for us to act when it comes to climate change. Otherwise, I think whatever we do after that is going to be too little, too late. And the water is going to be central to those whole discussions. Salute to ActionAid. I think you have done a great work. You continue to work not just on water, but also I think the very important part of your work is that you work with communities. And I think hearing that voice is very important. Having that voice in the table is very important. And I certainly look forward to interacting with you, trying to take up on the work that you have done and see how we can implement that and have better policies across the board. And I think as Bangladesh gets ready to celebrate 50 years of independence, this is also the year when we recall the great contributions of our father of the nation. It's his 100th birth anniversary. There is no better time to focus on an issue as critical and as fundamental to life as water. Thank you for having me. And I thank everyone who has taken part in this event over the last 3 days. And I just hope that we at the policy level can do justice to the work that you have done and the recommendations that you have come up with. Thank you, Farah.
Thank you. I'm encouraged by your last words to just share an experience that how the community in Bangladesh is is aware and is becoming active. The water issue for Kuakata and coastal areas led to a very innovative activism by the community. This was during Ramadan, and the embankments had broken and no one was repairing. So they took on a protest on the embankment, and they sat there and then they broke their fast there. The demand was that we want to talk to the Prime Minister and we want to share with her that these embankments are not being reconstructed or repaired, and we are suffering from the intrusion of salinity. And they were so adamant that ultimately the local government authority had to connect them with the Prime Minister, and they spoke. So, Bangladesh has amazing experiences and how they're putting these issues, and that action was taken. So you did ask, Honorable Member of Parliament, that how do we do this? These are the stories that need to be told, and their voices need to be brought, they need a seat at the table. Thank you. Anhara, back to you.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you, Mr. Sabir Hossain Chaudhary, for your valuable words. I would now like to invite Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, Professor, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka, to share a few words with us. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anahara. Thank you, Sabir Bhai, for an excellent presentation in such a short time. Thank you, Ambassador Nathalie, and also Ambassador Ken. Listen to you very keenly. I think several things came up in last 2-3 days. Well, Farah has already flagged some of these. Let me give my take on this issue of water and then climate and justice, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. The first thing that I have to flag is that pandemic will happen again. That's the point. This is not the last pandemic. This is the way virus works. Virus will mutate. Sometimes it mutates mildly. Sometimes it will mutate in an extraordinary way, as it has done in earlier times during the Spanish flu, which had other names as well. And this time also we had a mutation which is deadly. And this is how we co-evolve with virus. So since we know that COVID will happen in the future, there will be a pandemic in the future. The only thing is, how do you contain the pandemic and not let it go from epidemic to pandemic? Let's put it that way. If we can limit it to the epidemic, still, the world can function. And this time, and this brings me to the second point. I think what we have to be careful about is politics of insularity will not work. Unfortunately, we had insular governments in several places of the world, and I don't have to flag that. I'm sure those who are here would know that, and that really created a problem. So one of the big lesson, I think, ought to be, and this is the lesson also we had in the Spanish flu, but somehow, as you know, Spanish flu could not stop the Second World War, unfortunately, because people went for insularity. And this time, at least, somehow, up until now, we are successful that we have not produced another Mussolini or another Hitler. Those were produced before pandemic, maybe one or two, but not after pandemic. So I guess we are lucky a little bit, since we had a pre-pandemic phase of some of these insular regimens, because somehow politics is central to pandemic. And then it's of course science, but it's also very social science. And this is something which brings me to the third point, is that if there's any lesson from last 3 days and from COVID-19 pandemic, is we can't be national. We need to go post-national. We can't be disciplinary. We need to go post-disciplinary. I'm not even using the word multidisciplinary. You have to go beyond disciplines. So post-disciplinary, post-nationality ought to be flagged. Now, I think Sabir Bhai has really raised a question: how do you bring that into policy? How do you bring the masses and mainstream that? And that, I think, is where the creativity and innovation would lie. And I think the pandemic has showed that you can be very rich, you can have the excellent universities in the world, but it will not help you unless you're very smart in tackling things. And I always give the example of Vietnam, for example. It doesn't have any university in the first 400. The first university that it has is 401 in the world ranking. But look at how they have managed it. And that's smart, playing smart. Whereas there are countries which had excellent universities in the first 10. So it looks like education has to be reinvented, rethought. Unfortunately, now that the vaccine is coming up, people don't learn. The only thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. But this is an opportunity, I guess, for many, many countries, including Bangladesh, since Bangladesh somehow, I would agree with a lot of people in the government, that I guess we did relatively better. Let's put it that way, and it could be for different reasons. It may not be all for political reasons. It could be for reasons that the strain was different. It could be for reasons of vitamin D. It could be reasons because other viruses were also there. So somehow that worked. There are different explanations. But the fact remains is that we have been blessed, relatively speaking, from some of the countries. So let's take the opportunity and not be complacent about it. And I think this is the lesson we learn. And finally, I'll stop by saying that since ActionAid, we have been doing this for every year for last, I think, 5 or 6 years. The next year ought to be a blend of technology and the physical presence in Kuakata. The idea was always to have this international conference in Kuakata, and we tried our best in last 4 or 5 years. Farah worked very hard on that, but this is the new normal. And look at the amazing thing we have done this time by bringing people from all around the world to speak about issues which will contribute and which affects everyone. And so the classroom has to change. And I use the concept called D-class space. And so if you want, Sabar Bhai, any direct policy relevant thing is this whole education format, how you transform the classroom where somebody who is lecturing in Dhaka University, he or she can be heard in Netrakona, in Sylhet, in Borishal simultaneously. There's no reason for somebody from Borishal to come all the way to Dhaka anymore. And this is the technology we need to build up. At the same time, not limited to Bangladesh. Somebody who is speaking in Dhaka can also be listened to in Oxford and in Cambridge or in Philippines or somewhere else in China. And bring the resource person from China, from Mexico, and have a virtual university or a classroom like the one that we have now, which will be policy relevant in the sense, what are the options that they are utilizing and what are the options Bangladesh ought to take. And this is possible. So we need to sit down and see how we can think out of the box. As they say, way back, Lao Tzu and Einstein, they've always pointed out that every crisis or chaos, creates an opportunity. And I think we need to look into this opportunity. So I am quite optimistic, given though we are in a very sad kind of a situation with so many dear ones who have passed away, which is unthinkable. Even today, I was looking at the figures around the world. Still, it's bad in some of the countries. It's so sad. If you look at Mexico, I don't know why they're unable to contain it, whereas some countries have. And so it's not a good time as we speak, but still, I'm hopeful that humans will be able to overcome this. And I thank ActionAid and the entire team who have worked very hard to continue this, to hammer this, and in a much more, I would say, in a way where you can bring ideas, and you may not agree to those ideas, but listening to those ideas can actually ignite our imagination to the point which would help the humans in a big way. I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Farah.
Thank you, Imtiaz Bhai. We will be coming to the close of the session, but before we do that, we have a song to finish with. But before we do that, I think just as we want to see COVID-19 as an opportunity, the pandemic as an opportunity, I think this is the time to change our mindset and our behavior and encourage the young and women and girls to be at the table in decision making, in sharing, because water is such an integral part of a girl and a woman's life, whether as a caregiver, as a mother, as a childbearer, cooking food, everything. Society gives this responsibility and role to the woman and the girl, but it does not support with what it should be supporting, the technology, the access, the resources. And we cannot forget that, as has been said by Ken and others, that such a huge population is not in the coverage of safe water. Similarly, this year, when you look at the business figures, the tech companies have made billions. I was watching a report and they have made like 100 plus billions of, so they have not suffered in this pandemic. So how do we hold them accountable and responsible to provide the transfer of technology and support? So when we go out of these sessions, we all need to go back into our own countries and with our own networks and access to ensure that we can hold them responsible and bring in some of these resources. I'm not saying that Bangladesh is looking for just money, but Bangladesh is looking for technological partnership and moving away from that control. And it took us a long time to get the solar energy from where it started in Germany to become something local. So we need to also find energy and resources that will make sure that the scarcity of water is dealt with. And I think this is where we can talk about the public-private civic partnership. I'm taking this from Deepak Gawali. And with those few words, I want to thank all of you and just to remind you that again, January 2022, 26, 27, 28, we shall be having the 7th International Water Conference. And, start preparing, come with your stories, share your ideas. And if you have a polymath like Dr. Imtiaz, who goes from river, water, diplomacy, international relations to genocide. So I'm sure we will have something very interesting. Thank you, Sabir Bhai. Thank you, Salim Bhai. Thank you, Ken and Natalie for being with us. And now over to you, Anhara. Before we finish, can we hear Farida Parveen? And then we can say bye for this time.
Thank you, Appa. We will now share a song celebrating the rivers of Bangladesh, sung by renowned singer, Miss Farida Parveen, mystic poet, Lalon Fakir. Can we play the song, please?
ভালোবাসার এমনি ধারা হয়, তুই হৃদয় দিলে হৃদয় পাবি এমন কথা নয়। তুই ভুল করেছিস ভালোবেসে ঘর বাঁধা কি যায়, তোর কোনো কি ব্যথার দোসর নাই নদী, তোর কোনো কি ব্যথার দোসর নাই। তোর সারা জনম একলা পথে পথেই কেটে যায়, তোর কোনো কি ব্যথার দোসর নাই নদী, তোর কোনো কি ব্যথার দোসর নাই নদী রে, তোর কোনো কি ব্যথার দোসর নাই নদী, 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 তোর কোনো কি ব্যথার দোসর নাই।
Song. I would now like to thank our excellencies and distinguished guests for your valuable and enlightening words. That brings us to the end of our 3-day conference. Thank you all for joining us at the 6th International Water Conference 2021. On behalf of ActionAid Bangladesh, I would like to thank all our guests, speakers, and participants from all over the world who has joined us in this 3-day experience. It was wonderful having you all. Till then, goodbye and have a nice day.
See you next year.
See you next year.